Chapter 1. Wire in the Rain. Monsoon dusk fell on the Sunderbans like a lid. The river breathed brine and rot. Mangrove knees rose from the mud like a forest of blackened fingers. Crabs stitched the banks with hieroglyphics that the next tide would erase. She moved through it all without ripple, muscles shouldering water, whiskers reading the air. The tigress carried the smell of rain on her coat and the map of the delta in her bones. Thunder crawled somewhere to the south. The wind came salted and sweet, the way it did when Cheeto bedded down and wild boar rooted along the higher hummocks. She tasted the night with an open mouth, drawing scent over the palate. Human, far, thin, a smear of kerosene and betel nut spit. Old, she told herself, or wind-born from the river. The forest belonged to her. It had always belonged to her. A narrow path led from tamarisk to a saddle of dry ground where deer sometimes paused and forgot to be careful. She knew the place. It was a hinge in the green world. She put her paws there the way she always did. Left, then right. Weight spread like a question. The wire answered first. It came out of the grass with the speed of a striking snake, not moving at all and yet suddenly everywhere. A bicycle cable, oiled and clever, cinched her foreleg at the elbow and bit clean through the wet fur into heat and pain. The anchor, looped around a mangrove root the size of a man's torso, held. She yanked and the snares sang a thin, cruel note. Mud fanned, roots clawed her belly. She froze, because freeze is the third answer, after fight and run, and put all her listening into the ground. The cable held its breath with her. It did not let go. Her heart went heavy, then fast, then a bell again. She tested the line with the slow intelligence of muscle. Went back, wait forward. The give of steel measured in hair-thin increments. Each tug drew the loop tighter, the pain wider. She went still and let rain bead on her whiskers. If she could make the forest forget her, the forest might make the wire forget too. Voices came with the rain. Not the river floaters with their nets and diesel cough, not honey collectors singing to keep courage from running out of their feet. These were close, careful voices. A red diode winkered once through the stems, then died. The men had learned even that could betray them. Their shoes made sounds that said they'd done this before. Tread set soft, heel turned to mud, toe finding root, a choreography of thieves. Shh, one of them said, though no one else was speaking. She felt the notch of the cable in her bone. She crouched, then exploded, and the world went to a bright arch of snarling pain. The mangrove root jumped in the ground, the wire scalded, and one of the men fell backward with a curse. The others did not run. Poles came, forked sticks with loops at the end, the smell of fish oil and old rope. One pole kissed her throat and slid back in a hurry. Another found her forepaw and tightened just enough to make her feel the geometry of her own fury. A cloth went over her head, heavy with the memory of jute sacks and blood. She tore it away with a rake of claws, caught a sleeve and a slice of skin with it, and the man howled, the sound an animal would never make. They waited then. She could feel their patience like heat. They had time. The river would give them the rest. She went to ground, chest to mud, heart making the whole world move beneath her. The dart hit behind the shoulder. The impact itself was small, a slap on the hide, and the sting was nothing. The drug moved like lightning without thunder. Her vision narrowed to a dark tunnel with rain at the far end. The men spoke soft around her, as if she were a sleeping god you woke with milk. Wait, careful. 1, 2, lift. They did not remove the wire, they worked around it, because the wire was their guarantee. The cloth came back, tied mean. The poles nudged her into a heavy box that stank of bleach and iron, an animal that had been animal no more. The crate had bars that fit teeth perfectly and gave them nothing. When the door slammed, the sound traveled into the water and came back to her skull. They moved her with ropes and curses and the grunt of lifted men.
The crate hit a boat hole and skidded into place. She felt the river under her, knew the taste of its breath, and understood with a deep, cold awareness that none of it belonged to her anymore. The tide tugged, the boat listened, the mangroves turned their backs. She kept herself small. A great body has small instincts: conserve, calculate, wait. The drug was a hand on the back of her head pushing gently towards sleep. She held her eyes open and counted the rhythms that counted in this new dark. Oars, generator throb, a radio's insect buzz. The wire bit each time the boat bumped chop. Her tongue found the fur on her shoulder and made long, cleaning strokes she could not complete. They brought her to a jetty where dogs barked without conviction and men smoked under yellow bulbs that made the rain look tired. The crate rattled from boat to bed of truck by way of shoulders and sliding planks. Keys chattered, a ringful, a sound like tiny alarm birds, and the padlock teeth bit shut. Diesel climbed into the truck's ribs. The night got longer. She dozed and woke and dozed again while the world unrolled. A road that was really a series of puddles stitched together. The sweet, sour rot of shrimp waste at a riverside market and the wet mildew of a warehouse where sacks of rice made stubborn shadows. Once, the truck stopped and the men opened the crate to jab her with something that burned and then cooled to fog. They poured bleach into the corners and sluiced it with a bucket until everything in her nose went white and blank. They crossed a place where the air changed. The smell of the river fell behind. Mountains breathed somewhere far to the east. The words the men used for cigarettes were no longer the words they used before. There were new signs, ironed into metal, painted onto walls, made of tight combs and spears of letters her mind could not hold. She learned them as smells: old rain on split concrete, wet canvas, hot iron. Days blurred, nights thickened. Sometimes she dreamed she was water with a tiger shape moving inside it, and sometimes she dreamed she was a tree, and her cubs climbed her back one by one to reach a moon that wasn't there. Another warehouse bigger, a fence that admitted only the right mistakes. Frogs sang in a ditch and then made no sound at all when a torch's beam visited them. She tasted rats in the air and plastic wrap and a lot of perfume on one person's shirt. The men spoke softly about routes and buyers, about tomorrow night and the port and Phnom Penh, syllables that meant nothing and everything. She understood only the way their voices lifted at the ends of sentences when fear pressed the last word. Then the sea. She knew it without seeing it. Salt too big for the mouth, wind too wide for the leaves. The crate became a room and a metal belly with no edges. She measured time there by men's boots and the thin blue buzz of fluorescent tubes with bad ballast. Her world had shrunk to a long rectangle and a sore leg and the memory of an eel sliding along her side when she swam through mangrove channels one lifetime ago. Even metal bellies must open. They did, at night, at a place that had cranes like long-necked birds eating stars. The crate slid to concrete. Hands moved it to a smaller truck, then a smaller one, like prey being passed mouth to mouth in a pack. Dust took the rain's place on her whiskers. The air went from fish sweet to the chalk stink of old limestone and sun-beaten walls. The final road ran along a canal, where water moved with the bored unwillingness of an animal born in a tub. A dog watched the truck pass and did not bark. The driver's phone made a happy sound like a frog that had learned money. Ahead, a gate rolled on its track with a cough. Inside, a yard of broken concrete stitched with weeds and stains. A roofline shaved off a piece of sky. A red lantern burned above a door not for her. She smelled bleach again, fresh, recent, meant to hide other stories, and a rust that was not rust, the iron smell of old blood. They set the crate down. A woman in a plastic apron looked at her the way some men look at knives, admiring the shine and the edge while remembering the weight. Someone laughed. Someone spat. Keys clinked. The padlock that held her world shut found its new map of scars. A shutter rattled up on metal rails. The darkness inside had a hum to it, a small electric purr that lived in walls. They heaved the crate across the lip, its iron bars ringing a dull note against the threshold. She turned her head and found the opening she could not use, the slip between door and jamb where night held a slimmer night, and she breathed there, counting the human sweat that moved past it, the old stain under new cleaners, the phantom of a forest embalmed in chemicals. The gate slid down behind her with the inevitability of tide. It closed with a sound that bit bone. Darkness took the room to itself. It smelled like bleach and iron, and she, who had carried the Sunderbans under her ribs like a second lung, felt the forest go out one slow exhale at a time.
Chapter 2. The Gentle Fonts. The welcome sign wore a smile. Pastel leaves curled around a slogan in soft, rounded type. We care, so they thrive. The letters were so friendly they looked padded. Below them, a cartoon tiger blinked 2 dots for eyes and held a heart between its paws. The hallway beyond was the kind of clean you hear before you smell. The hiss of conditioned air sliding through grates, the hush of rubber soles, the careful whisper of people trying to be good in a holy place. A recorded voice asked for quiet, then asked again in a kinder voice. Somewhere behind drywall, a low, steady hum kept an even, patient note. He stood in that air and felt it thin the edges of the day. It had the neutrality of a doctor's office, the brightness of a pharmacy. On the posters, rescue, rehabilitation, rewilding. Beneath the words, bullet points like lullabies. Inside the glass, Maya turned the room into a metronome. 12 paces north wall to south wall. Pause. Nose to seam, whiskers reading the tiny weather of a draft that never changed. 12 paces back. The floor wore her in it, dark arcs, scuffed tight to the corners. Her body moved like a sentence, repeating itself to remember how it ends. The glass gave the room 2 skies. On her side, a ceiling like cloudless noon. On his side, a wetter, smudged one. Children pressed fingertips to it and left moons that swelled, then faded. Their parents lifted them and read the placard aloud. Maya, F. Eastern lineage. Rescued from illegal trade. The gentle font put soft cheeks on the words. A thumbnail-sized red LED winked from the camera's housing. On, off, on, like a patient eyelid. Maya tasted iron in the air, always that, and bleach underneath. The hum in the wall was a thing with lungs. She knew it the way she knew rainfall. When it grew, she could cover her movement in its cloth. When it dipped, she became too loud for the size of her life. A keeper's keys rang far away and came closer, a metal bird song that lived behind doors the public didn't see. The jingle threaded itself through the hum and was gone. The smell of thawed meat, old blood gone sweet, freezer burns chalk, arrived from a corridor like a rumor. He adjusted himself along the rail, between a stroller and a man with a camera whose strap left a dark line on his neck. The room had no corners for breath to hide. His own reflection coexisted with her stripes until he forgot which surface was real. He lowered his head, closer, and the glass threw his face back at him, a ghost layered over a tiger. Inside, Maya changed the pattern. She stopped 1 pace early. Muscles under her skin clenched and released, a small world choosing how to rotate. She pressed her left shoulder to the rockwork where rock met floor, there where the geometry betrayed the builder's hand. A seam, a generous seal, a millimeter of idea that someone had called good enough. Her weight said, "Hello," to the plate beneath. It answered in a faint, pleased click. "What's she doing?" a child asked, awe and worry braided tight. "She's stretching," a father said with the calm certainty adults keep like change in a pocket.
Stretching, she held the contact a heartbeat longer, reading the seam the way a tongue reads a tooth. The plate remembered it was separate and made a breath of give. She felt it, a vibration small as a moth's wing. There, the place where the world wasn't welded right. The place where the air tasted slightly different, as if it had come from a tunnel with memories. The red dot blinked, blinked, blinked. He glanced up at the camera, then followed the ceiling grid to a gray door recessed beside a mural of leaves. Above the door, authorized personnel only, in the same gentle font, which somehow made it worse. When the door opened, barely, the service corridor exhaled. Warm, machine-breathed air touched his face, metallic, damp, like an elevator sigh. Behind it, that key chime, brief and cheerful, then distant. Maya slid her shoulder harder into the seam, the lightest scrape of metal under stone. She flicked her ears toward the corridor she could not see and held still so that the hum could hide the sound she was about to make. A hand knocked glass, not a slap, a knuckles curiosity. The tiny sound jumped into the room with the force of a thrown pebble. Maya's head turned and the hand flinched away. The red light blinked twice, faster now, then settled into the old rhythm. The first time, weeks ago, she had put her forepaw under a similar scene by accident. The floor had lifted a breath, and the breath had been a promise. She had pressed, and the room had responded, and then men had come the way men do. Shoes that know to be soft, the smell of radio static, the stab of air against fur where needle goes in. The world narrowed to a tunnel. They called it an incident in a voice that never left the office. Afterwards, the hum returned. The seam pretended to be seamless again. They wrote something on paper, and a bolt found a new home where air once lived. He didn't know any of that. What he knew was the glass and his own lungs. There was not enough space for the day to complete itself. A little girl squealed laughter at a meerkat poster. Wrong exhibit. Wrong height, the sound misplaced, and the laughter braided into the hum into something that wouldn't leave his ear. A guide somewhere behind him was rehearsing kindness at a group. "We are so fortunate to be stewards," words that floated like dust motes and never landed. Maya shifted her weight, millimeter by millimeter. She let her breath leak out in a long, cloth-smooth stream, so even the air would not notice. The plate yielded again, that tiniest surrender. She placed the nail of her outer toe at the edge and dragged, slow as moss. The metal caught, juddered, the private note of a locked thing thinking about a different life. The red dot watched. The door by the knurl opened wider, the corridor's hum grew, a throat clearing. Two figures in neutral fleece. One carried a clipboard, the other had a ring of keys and a smile he wore because he had been told it helped the public feel good about glass. "Excuse us," the smiling one said, moving through the little cluster like a polite shark. He stepped back and felt the handrail press against his spine. The air seemed closer. The stroller's wheel kissed his shoe and stayed there. He could feel the child's soft breath on his wrist. He wanted to leave and also, perversely, could not, because every part of him had been trained by signs and gates and fonts to wait his turn, to complete the loop, to observe. Inside, Maya adjusted her head to see past her own shoulder. The clipboard put a rectangle of peppered paper into the world. The title line was printed in big, calm letters, "Corrective Actions." The smaller letters, the ones that bite, said, "Post-Incident Review, Subject Maya, F. Access-prone panel, tighten hinge bolts, add padlock, increase observation during high-activity hours, sedation protocol on escalation." She didn't read, not the way men meant reading. She read the air changing. The keyring rang once, twice, charming as a lie. The keeper knelt by the seam and pressed 2 fingers to the plate the way a priest checks the pulse of a scripture. He looked up at the camera, then down at the bolt already shining with a fresh mouth of metal. He tightened it until the extension of his wrist trembled. "Just a quick fix," he murmured, maybe to the clipboard, maybe to himself. "Routine," the other said. On the visitor side of the glass, routine lost its spine and laid down like an old cat. Behind it, the hum moved a fraction lower. He found himself matching it, breath for breath, until he realized he had been holding in and not letting out. When he released, the relief was too big for the size of his chest. He looked at her, at the fact at her, and felt a wrongness without a handle. Maya felt the bolt set, the world harden where it had been soft. She leaned, the plate stayed plate, the seam forgot. She held her body still, stiller, beyond still, a patience so complete it became something else. The children drifted. The father read the little paragraph aloud and made it sound like a bedtime story. Maya was rescued from danger. Here she is safe. The word safe hit the glass and came back thin. The keeper with the key stood and let the ring fall against his thigh. The small sound landed in her bones the way rain does when you've been waiting for it. He smiled at no one in particular, then at the glass broadly and walked away.
The corridor breathed him back in. The door shut. The mural leaves went on being green. The hum settled into its old number. The red dot blinked like a metronome, marking time for a song no one wanted to hear anymore. He stayed a moment longer, because that's what you do. You buy the story, or you don't, but either way you finish the loop. He searched her face for something that might absolve him of being here, then hated himself for the search. On the placard, a smaller line of gentle type said, "Your visit supports conservation." His ticket in his pocket agreed. Maya made the room into a sentence again. 12 paces north to south. Pause. Nose to seam. Not because she believed, but because believing is a muscle you can't let atrophy if you ever want to use it. 12 paces back. The air stayed the same. The bolt stayed true. Her shoulder remembered the ghost of give and kept the memory private. Behind a door labeled staff only, the clipboard slid into a wall slot with a plastic thunk. A fluorescent tube buzzed and shivered, and then decided to live. On the form, ink dried under the word completed. Somewhere farther down the corridor, a dart gun lived in its locker like a silent opinion. He turned away at last. As he stepped into the next gallery, the service tunnel took a breath he could feel on his forearms, lifting the hairs and putting them down again. He told himself it was just air. Air is nothing. Air cannot mean. Inside the glass, Maya set her paw where the plate had once answered anew with the clarity that comes to animals and sometimes to men in the second before sleep, that hope would need another door. For now, there was only the hum, the blink, the jingle fading behind walls, and a bolt bitten down hard into the floor of her life.